Education policy is hard. Children are involved, so emotion often obscures logic. And even when committed to a rigorous, evidence-based approach, the data's noisy and it's often unethical to conduct randomised controlled trials. It's hard to measure important things like creativity or character. And even for narrower academic outcomes, no one thinks the assessment system is perfect. An education system is simultaneously one of the most important things a society can build and one of the hardest to get right. Given the complexity, attempts to implement worthy change are plagued by unintended consequences. For example, the introduction of the English Baccalaureate in 2010 was intended to increase rigour, but not counting subjects such as drama, music and art may have accelerated the decline of the creative arts. Oh dear. But then its removal seems to have accelerated the decline of modern languages. Or 20 years ago, many governments sought to strengthen literacy and numeracy by devoting more teaching time to them in the early years. It sounds sensible, but it backfired because the time was taken from subjects such as history and geography. And it turns out that if you want to understand the world, knowing how to pronounce written words isn't enough. You have to know vocabulary and facts and important concepts that explain how the world works. So, welcome back, history and geography. When dealing with anything complex, beware the unintended consequences. Let's apply that to two current hot topics in education. There are early signals of a shift in coming years to on-screen assessments at GCSE and A-level. The government recently launched a consultation about their proposed introduction, at first just in a few subjects and not the most popular ones. Sensible questions are being considered. Fairness, accessibility, technical feasibility, whether it's valid to have some pupils doing an exam on screen and others on paper, and how it might help those with special educational needs. There's also a big advantage in efficiency and cost, which is an important consideration in national education policy. But one vital point is entirely missing: the effect of online exams on the teaching leading up to them. What gets tested gets taught. If high-stakes exams go online, it will inevitably drive more classroom teaching and more routine assessment online. Schools that are conscientiously preparing their pupils for high-stakes exams are duty-bound to give them familiarity with the modes of testing that are ultimately used. So that means more reliance on digital devices in day-to-day school life. Now, there is a good use case for digital devices sometimes. But we know that reading, writing and maintaining focus are all harder when using digital devices than when using pen and paper. It's like driving with the handbrake on. So schools everywhere are already experiencing pressure to move pupils onto laptops, even where it's unwarranted. And again, let's be clear, there are cases where it's justified, but nothing like the number of requests received. The fact that high-stakes exams are administered on paper is very useful in assisting schools to hold the line. You're going to have to write on paper eventually, so best to practice it along the way. But if that goes, the encroachment of devices beyond their proper bounds is inevitable. We thus run the risk that for the sake of more efficient administration of exams for a few hours at the age of 18, we compromise daily learning for the 14 years leading up to them. It's a mistake to think that assessment systems are independent of curriculum and teaching. What gets tested gets taught. Meanwhile, there's a vigorous public debate about mobile phones in schools. As you know, we have long restricted access to them. No phones during the school day, tight and age-adjusted limits on phones out of hours, no phones overnight, and next year's JP will be moving altogether to brick phones. For us, then, the government's new ban on phones represents no change. But it is a marked departure from the educational debate 10 years ago, when mobile phones in schools were typically represented as the educational tool of the future. Well, the zeitgeist has changed on that one. But at the same time, schools require pupils to have laptops, usually 24/7. Now, pretty much everything you can do on a mobile, you can do on a laptop or a tablet. So if the child has their own school-mandated device the whole time, most of the behaviour we're trying to stop on the mobiles will simply shift to the laptops and iPads. That's why we've been addressing all these issues together. Pupils have laptops, but there are careful age-adjusted boundaries around their use of them. The younger years don't use laptops for homework and, to the irritation of many, we don't allow additional devices at Winchester, so we have a clear picture of what tech they're using and when. Last term, inspectors observed how refreshing it was to see that the screens were put away in classrooms when they weren't specifically needed, cultivating good habits, optimising learning, and creating the space for our signature discursive forms of inquiry. So far, the interaction between digital devices and mobile phones seems to have been overlooked in the government's advice and the public debate. But if WhatsApp is out of reach on a mobile phone and then open on the child's laptop throughout the day, how much difference will the change in policy make? So here we are, back in the land of unintended consequences. Even if on-screen exams were ultimately superior, they could drive a reliance on digital devices in schools which undermines learning. And pushing ahead with mobile phone bans without paying close attention to tablets and laptops might just be a waste of time. I have no doubt that our political leaders want to do the right thing in education, which is the gateway to individual success and collective prosperity. But the road to educational failure is paved with good intentions. The young people whose future is at stake deserve a proper debate and good public policy.